My guest on the podcast today went from commanding Green Berets and combat zones to declaring personal bankruptcy. Then he built the fastest growing martial arts company in the Southeast. Sean Patton's story isn't about military grit. It's about what happens when grit alone isn't enough. So this is a great story, and I hope you enjoy as much as I did. Sean, welcome to the podcast. I appreciate you making the time.
Yeah, thanks for being on today, Todd. I'm excited.
Good. Well, why don't we start with maybe just a little bit of a background, maybe 30 seconds to a minute of just kind of your background and how you got here.
Yeah, absolutely. So my background is actually in the military. I am from Kansas originally, and then I went to the military academy at West Point. I know you're a New York guy as well, so I was in upstate New York, about 45 minutes north of New York City. I spent 10 years as an active duty Army officer in the infantry and then in Army Special Forces. I was a Green Beret detachment commander for 2 different detachments. Spent time in Iraq, Afghanistan, and a few places in between. And, I was, despite all of the things I was doing in that time period, I was never really like the gun guy or the gear guy. It was always about people and leadership and solving problems. That's what I loved about what I was doing. And so I knew that I wanted to do what I'm doing now, which is working with leaders and executives and bringing, raising the level of leadership inside of our companies and our communities. But I didn't want to be the military officer. I got out and said, all right, business leaders, let me tell you about real leadership. When I'd never been in business a day in my life. I like to make the joke that too many military officers do that, usually with the first name Colonel. So I thought, well, I need to, see what applies. I knew I'd crammed a lifetime of leadership lessons into those 14 years. But I thought, let's test, kind of like cut my chops, right, in business. I know you guys are about doing things in the real world and learning out in the wild. And so I got my MBA, and then I started my first company. And it turns out that starting a business with zero industry or business experience is the fastest way to make as many mistakes as possible. So a few panic attacks and a bankruptcy later, I started my second company with really just the goal of getting it self-sustainably profitable. And it didn't have to be a unicorn; it just had to make money without me there. Got it there in 3 years, and I have been coaching leaders and executives inside companies and founders for the last 6 years.
There's something embedded in that that's kind of interesting. I guess that idea of like you have a day job and you decide to go do something different. Like that pivot is hard, right? And I think a lot of people, especially when we were talking about a lot of our founders have a domain expertise. So they're a nurse at a hospital, and now they're talking about saying, I know I could go solve this problem in a different way as an entrepreneur. That's very similar to your background, where it's like you were in the military, you had some experiences, you thought you could be an entrepreneur. Was there a specific point or like a moment that acted as that catalyst to do it? Because that's not an easy thing to do, right? You know that some things are going to translate, but you don't know the other things that don't.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, what was so interesting was I had been successful in every leadership role I had had. And honestly, this goes back before West Point. Like, it goes back to like high school, wrestling team captain, Eagle Scout, like attorney general at Boise State. Like, leadership had been my thing. I mean, since I was a kid. And then inside this container of the military, I had succeeded as well. And there was just like this itch of, what does this look like outside of this container? Like, what does this look like on my own, making these decisions, learning lessons? And I don't think, some people maybe have this idealized version of the entrepreneur lifestyle. Like I knew like this is probably going to suck a little. Like I kind of knew that, right? Like, it's hard. I didn't appreciate how hard it was, for sure. I don't know if anyone really can until you do it. Yeah. I also, you would think that being a Green Beret detachment commander at 28, 29 on the Afghan-Pakistan border is sort of like the highlight of my hero's journey to becoming the person I'm capable of. But my gosh, was it just still the rising climax to having a business, honestly, realizing that some of the things I thought were strengths from my own mindset, my own perspective, were actually weaknesses.
Like what?
The deepest one is that my identity, had been tied to being a winner. My identity had been tied, my whole psyche around mattering. Like my life, in order for my life to matter, I have to accomplish. Mm-hmm. I have to be successful in people's eyes. I had it's a fall from grace when you go from, you know, being seen as literally kind of a Captain America type figure to the people in your world to now you're a business owner and you're a gym and like, oh wow, look, to I just lost hundreds of thousands of dollars. I just declared bankruptcy. I'm a West Point grad, Green Beret, failed business owner who's driving Uber and Venmoing my 24-year-old girlfriend so she can send me money to buy fish. Like that was where I was at a moment. And what it forced me to do was realize that I'd put myself in that position because I hadn't done the inner work for me. Like I was being driven by fear, by the fear of failure, by the trying to fit in other people's expectations. Like everything was external. And that experience forced me to create my own identity and learn how to be what it feels like to be driven from a more from abundance and from love and from enoughness, and not from I'm not enough and I have to achieve or I'm nothing. And if I had done that work beforehand, I think that business would have had a majorly different outcome.
Well, I appreciate you being vulnerable and explaining that. I think lots of people can relate. I mean, I think my personal journey, I have some of that as well. I think, I had a pretty high-powered job at a company called Concur. And, one day you quit and the phone doesn't ring, right? And so much of your personality is kind of just wrapped up in that role and that persona and what people see. And I think even my own personal journey of like unraveling that and saying, why do you get up in the morning? What do you value? And so I guess maybe kind of building back on it, do you think that you could, the military is kind of a microcosm, right? There's a lot of structure around that for you. Mm-hmm. Do you think you could have done a lot of that work that you talk about like there? Mm-hmm. Or do you think that like in some cases it takes some of the areas away from you that maybe you didn't have to develop because there's infrastructure, and then once you go to like a startup where it is you and there is none of this infrastructure, then you feel way more vulnerable. And I think that lots of founders feel that, right? They're already in a corporation, they're in a job, their job description is well defined, and then once you get in, it's you.
Mm-hmm. No, you hit the nail on the head. And I think it looks different for different people. When I've worked with a lot of entrepreneurs, especially transitioning from a career somewhere or any major transition, one thing is as simple as like schedule, right? Like scheduling your time, like scheduling your day. You had this external thing of like be here at this time and go to these meetings, and you just sort of like filled in the white space in the in the morning and night. Some of your, especially more maybe blue collar workers that are coming from blue collar industries or medical field can relate to this. But like, I joke all the time that I got out of the military at 32 and I was in my mid 30s. And all of a sudden I'm like, wait a minute, how do I want to dress myself? It's like, I just been choice. I haven't think about it. I was just in a uniform all the time. And then my first business was the gym. So I just wore gym stuff, like a white black polo. So it's like, all of a sudden I'm like, oh my gosh. And you don't realize how much like identity is sort of tied to that. And so I think that, there's the in my mind, I can say they're like smaller things, but they can be major things, which is like the self-discipline of managing your priorities and time can be so critical. But at a deeper level and sort of how you get to that, and you sort of mentioned this, like what matters to you, why you're doing this, is I think it just comes out to identity and purpose. Mm-hmm. And I think that's the reason a lot of military veterans, and you mentioned even maybe from another career, is that like those can be given to you, right? Like you're a soldier, or you're a doctor, or you're an engineer, or you're a VP of sales, you're whatever, and your purpose is the mission that's given to you, or whatever the business purpose is, and here's your metrics for success, right? And so cool, I know what those two things are, and especially right in this country, we which one of the reasons we're so successful from a business standpoint, but like so much of our identity gets wrapped in our career. It's very easy to make that your career, especially in certain careers. And if we don't develop, and this would be like sort of my message as people maybe are thinking about making this jump or just have made this jump, is like dedicate real energy and work to creating vision around what is the purpose of what I'm doing, what do I want to chase after, and what is my identity as a person outside of what I do. Like that's like, man, that is deep, hard work.
It is.
But it makes it's where resilience comes from.
And growth. Yep.
Is where growth and resilience come from. If your identity and your fulfillment and, how you feel about yourself is completely tied to external outcomes that you don't control, you are in a very fragile place.
Yeah.
And it will make the inevitable roller coaster of entrepreneurship. There will be lows, and the more you can keep yourself sort of even keel and relate to that as like, I'm fine. And, this wasn't the case for me for a little bit in terms of like financial scarcity, but for most of us, if we really pull back, our ego, our minds, our mindset is telling us that we are fighting through scarcity. Like we're waking up with, in my case, like panic attacks in the middle of the night about like this business and all stuff. But like in reality, we're playing in abundance.
Yeah. Go to a foreign country.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, that was one thing I was really like, even in those moments, I obviously I've been in places in the world, rural Afghanistan and places that have known nothing but violence for thousands of years. Like, yeah, I was able to use some of that perspective to my advantage while I was figuring myself out. But exactly. So like, not to downplay the significance of what you're trying to do or the seriousness of what's going on, but if you can just shift that mindset to be like, I get to play in this, I get to create, and you really are focused on the process. I think that you create vision to drive you, and you are clear on reality. You get real sober about like, where am I actually at? And people can do two things. They can bring down vision, or they can inflate reality. I was in inflate reality. Like, it's not that bad. I actually run weights here. I've got this here. And then all of a sudden, like the numbers come in, you're like, oh crap. Not so much. How am I going to pay taxes? Yeah. So like getting so about vision reality, but then like what we're talking about to me is like the gap between those two things. And how do you want to relate to that gap? Because you can relate like the sky is falling and I'm not enough and I'm never going to be enough. And once I get this thing, then I can be happy. Once I get this thing, I can have peace. Once I get this thing. Yeah. And that is a goalpost that will continue to move. And so how do you change your relationship to the gap and realize the gap is life? Yeah. The gap is life. It's a process.
Yep. That's good. Well, maybe pivoting a little bit back to like the military and stuff. And you talk a little bit on like no limit leadership. Are there a bunch of things that translated well from a leadership perspective from the military to business? And are there some other things that did not translate as well as you kind of started to build kind of your current business?
Yeah, absolutely. The things I'm trying to think, I'm trying to like rattle them off. I don't have them top of mind, but like things that definitely work well. Like one is very clear on mission. Like, what are we trying to accomplish here? I see so much in business where people are sort of fuzzy about what they're actually trying to do. And the military definitely forces you to be like, this is mission.
So is that outcome or is that like, task, right? Because I think there's a difference between task, which is like activity, and outcome, which is, it doesn't really matter how many activities you do. The outcome is really what matters.
Yeah. So like, I'll give you the structure that I use and I've seen play out that I think translates well for both of those things. Okay. Was there's a structure called commander's intent. And what it is, it's mission. So what are we actually trying to accomplish here? Like what is going on? Then expanded purpose, which is like context, right? Like kind of the why, what's the conditions? You could consider that sort of like market conditions. What's the playing field? And then what are the key tasks? So you mentioned key tasks, like in order to accomplish mission, and you can establish how you want, like these 3 to 5 things have to happen. And then those should be like ruthless. These aren't like nice to have. So they're like, if one doesn't happen, we fail. And that's a hard exercise I have found for myself and for other people in the entrepreneurial space, because they want it all. They want all the features, they want all the things, and it's all going to be perfect. It's like, no. Like if there's only 3 things that have to happen in order to accomplish what you're trying to accomplish, like what are those? And then finally it's end state, to your point. And that is where we say, okay, like, when this mission done, and it doesn't have to be what I'm not talking about here is like vision, like I'm creating this new healthcare tech that's going to change the way that, patients interact with their data. And it's like, I'm like, what is this many people are going to be interacted at this time. Right. And so like being very clear on like, what is success? And so that sort of process of like, what are we doing and why? What are the 3 to 5 things that have to happen? And what does success look like at the end is a sort of a simple way to that can really add clarity. And that's what I find especially is so critical for entrepreneurs, is the ability to take this messy chaos around them and create simple clarity, because simple wins. And so the ability to really get that to their people, that I think is a critical skill that translates very well. And then also having very clear like roles and responsibilities, so everyone knows exactly what they're doing and what they're responsible for. We all know that if you're one of one, or if you're one of four, like you're going to have multiple hats to put on, but those shouldn't be up for interpretation. Right? Like somebody needs to own everything. If you're going to measure it, someone owns it. And I think sometimes newer business owners and entrepreneurs get away with just like, yeah, we're all kind of doing this thing together. Like, no, if there's 4 metrics, somebody's name's attached to each one, and everybody else can support them, but like somebody's got to own it. So those are a few things I think that translate from like a leadership or a structure well. What maybe I struggled with was, especially when it came into hiring people, I still kind of suck at hiring people. And I actually had one of the GM of one of my like gym locations tell me, she's like, you're not allowed to hire anymore. Like you're not in this cycle. Cause what sort of naturally, and then in the military, I think it was reinforced, especially in the type of units I was in, was I had this, I have this sort of like I can see what someone's capable of. Like I still to this day, like I can see, I see the raw materials here. Right. And what I didn't have, and I have it a little better now, but I didn't have a good skill set around or ability, was to see, but do they want it? Like those are two different things. And I got so in the military, and especially in the units I was in, it was like, if you're here, like if you say you're going to do something, you're going all out. Like it's getting done. And I'm trusting that you're going to do it.
You're assumed it because of the role. Yeah,
exactly. And man, that is just not the case when you start hiring people that everybody is in. And so I think that that's a key lesson that I see a lot of entrepreneurs and small business owners make, is there's this initial assumption, because you're so passionate about what you're doing, that everyone else is going to act like they're the owner too, and they're as passionate about it. And I mean, God, you get those first few hires right. Hopefully they're in, but like if they're not owners, don't expect them to think that way. And that requires a different type of leadership conversation to find out, like, why are you here? Yeah. Because maybe they're just coming in because they like working in startups and they want a chunk of equity. They're going to bust their butt for 3 years and then they're on to the next thing. And like, cool. Like you need those people, but let's have that conversation up front so we're on the same page. Because now I can support you in that. Right. And that's just one example. But yeah, adding clarity around people's motivations and why they're here and what they want to do. I think that's like not a conversation you have to have in the military. It's just like, it's ingrained. Like everyone knows why they're there and everyone is fully on board with mission.
Do you think people have that in the beginning, or they figure it out? Like you hire for a set of skills and then you have to develop trust for them to really be honest with you about what they're looking for. I mean, at least that's been in my experience. I mean, few people come to the table and like understand where their career and where they want and what the opportunity looks like. But I think in a lot of cases, they're like, I need to get comfortable. I don't really know you, and I'm not going to be, and I don't trust you to like be vulnerable enough to actually tell you where I want to go or where I can see myself going in this company.
Mm-hmm. So I think there's different ways to approach this. I would maybe push back a bit that like, I think as a leader, we can model that and you can create a culture. And I've seen cultures where it's right off the bat. Like, look, here's what I'm trying to do. Here's, like we have to model vulnerability for ourselves as leaders and give them and share maybe our mistakes and maybe share where we're trying to go with this and share. And especially if you're a newer business owner, to be like, I'm passionate about this. It might fail. Just so we're on the same page, like this may not work, but like here's what I think is going to happen, and I want to trust you, and you want to trust me, and I think you can build that quickly with the right conversation, and I think you can do it, direct. I think that I know I'm a Midwest guy, you're Midwest, or you're in the Midwest now, you're from North, but like I'll tell you, I see it's funny to me being out of the Midwest for a while, and then going back with family, and then also I have some clients in the Midwest as well. So I'm generalizing, but we'll just say for right now that this is common or more common in the Midwest. It's like the nice versus kind conversation. And there's a lot of people that are in that nice thing of like, well, I don't want to upset them and it might be uncomfortable and like, and you just let things sort of fester. And that's where things can really go wrong. And so what I would encourage anyone is if they struggle with that, if they struggle with, like a lot of us do, like I still do, like I hate confrontation. I don't like being uncomfortable. I don't like arguing over anything. Like I like peaceful living. But I think a lot of young entrepreneurs will do that and try to maintain peace. But what they're actually maintaining is like surface level peace with turbulence and chaos and unsaid things and expectations that are unsaid and not agreements. And so the quicker you can get to, I'm going to, it's starting off from, I'm going to be a kind leader, which means I'm going to be direct and I'm going to tell you, even if it makes us both uncomfortable, what's going on. And that's my expectation of you too. And that's the kind of company and culture we're going to have here. And to me, that's being kind. And I want to be kind, not nice. Yep. And I think that's an important distinction you can set from the beginning.
I do too. I think that's a really good point. Let's pivot a little bit to like your podcast. I think I looked it up, but like I listened to a couple episodes. I think you've done about 113. So congrats, you're way ahead of me. Talk to me a little bit about maybe something that was counterintuitive that you learned from interviewing other leaders that maybe you didn't think of at the time. Like, is there something that's a pretty big body of work? You interview a lot of different folks. And so I'm sure there's something counterintuitive in there that kind of was like a aha moment for you in those discussions.
Oh man. Yeah. There's so much gold in so many of those conversations that I've learned from. I mean, that was one of the reasons I started the podcast at the beginning. Cause I'm just like, this is an easy way to pick up, important people's brains and learn as much as I can and learn from their mistakes. Right. Yeah. So yeah, I think that, some of the directness from that, I think that one thing that is more natural to me now as I'm more of a seasoned executive coach, but early on was really powerful for me was like the power of asking great questions, like how so much as, in the military, we're kind of like this too, but so much of people who, as they come up in leadership, I see, and I sort of have this mindset around like, your job, you think that sort of your job is to solve problems as a leader. And so your natural thing is like someone comes to you and you're like, oh yeah, just do it this way. And they're like, oh, thanks boss. And they move on. And like, there's been like several instances that sort of got like chipped away at me of seeing how these like great leaders and coaches can have so much more power with powerful questions as opposed to answers. And there's a framework around 4 types of helping conversations that I think is really powerful that came from that, which is that there's mentoring, consulting, coaching, and teaching. Right. So there's 4. And those are all like important tools we need to have. But if you're not intentional in understanding that those are 4 different tools, we all have like a default. Like we either naturally default to teaching you what to do. We naturally default to consulting and telling you what to do. Some people default to coaching, like maybe that's because maybe the background in that or something, or mentoring. Oh, I did it this way, so you should do it this way, right? So there's like, those are 4 different tools, and it has come up in multiple conversations about how the best leaders like develop all 4 and then use the appropriate tool to get the outcome with that person they're trying to get in the best situation. And I think that's a really powerful, like I'm trying to be really tactical, like a really tactical set that if used correctly and used early and often can have like a very large impact.
And so how does that make it for you? Do you think you've developed all 4 of those to a certain extent, or you just basically are more intentional? I'm coaching, so this is how I'm going to go do it, and I'm going to go deeper on that. And just understanding there's a difference. And so when you're coaching, you're not trying to mentor or you're not trying to teach, right? You're basically trying to figure out what you're going to do. I think it's a really good concept, and I think I've blurred the lines across those myself. And so I'm kind of curious about how did you use that information to create lanes for yourself, even though you probably don't do all 4 of those. You're developing one of those in the consulting range today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I would say they're almost like sharpening. The more you are cognizant of them and the more you sharpen each one of those, the more, what's what I'm looking for? Like you're just better at knowing when to deploy them for the situation. And so I find myself, mostly in my coaching now with senior executives and founders, where the majority of the time I'm there to coach. So I'm going to ask questions. I believe that the resources in the client, and my job is to help pull that out of them and help they have the answers. And there's moments where I'm like, hey, I have a framework that I think might help here. Can we go over it? And then I'm teaching, and I'm like, here's the framework, right? Like vision gap reality is a framework. Like I see you're kind of struggling with this. Let's go over that. Okay, now let's use that as a frame, as sort of infrastructure, and now let's coach around that or whatever, right? So there is some teaching there. If I do like workshops and training, you find yourself with groups going back and forth, where I'm going to teach a concept, and then we're going to implement it, and I might coach somebody on that. And then I also find times where I help companies develop leadership development programs. So sometimes it's full-blown consulting, right? They're just like, no, here's what we want. And then I'm asynchronously like developing and giving them back to them. So I'm consulting with them, like, this is how I would put it together. So it is what I would say is that, again, there's situations in your life, whether and in all of leadership, whether that's leadership in your business, I would argue like leadership in your family, leadership in your community, right? With kids. And there's moments to be sort of a mentor, like, hey, I've been there, here's how I did it. And then if you do it in the wrong sense, they're like, yeah, Dad, but I don't want to be like you. And you're like, oh,
Ouch.
Ouch. But I get that, or I don't want to do that. Like a lot of times we default to like assuming that because we're more experienced or older or wiser, that like mentorship and what worked for me is the right answer. And it's like, if that person is trying to do what you do now, that might be true. And recognize they're probably doing it under different conditions, right? We were talking about AI before this and how important, like, the world, I have a very young son, so I'm new to this, but like, man, I'm looking at like, what are we going to do education wise? And I'm like, what does the world look like in 20 years? I have no idea, So I could tell him, yeah, go get good grades and, take AP classes and go get your 4-year college degree. But like, I've got friends with kids that are seniors in high schools. They're like, I don't even know if that makes sense anymore.
Right.
And so we're all under different conditions. So it's just being aware of that. And if you're not aware and have the awareness of like where those 4 could be helpful, you're not going to be as capable or as an impactful leader as you could be.
Yeah, I think that's good. You brought this up before, talking about your bankruptcy. I think my first company failed like full blown. I got some investor money. I got a bunch of folks to kind of work on it, and I basically lived on a couch, got rid of my apartment, sold my car to make payroll, and at the end of the day, it still went under. And so, I don't know about you, but like, there's a lot of painful lessons that I learned through that process. And so, talk to me a little bit about, like, I think sometimes we're nervous about failing, right? I think like we have this kind of fear of failure in our society, and so we don't take risks. And so you had a bankruptcy, which obviously leaves an impact. And so that's a bad day for you. But like, what did that actually do for you in changing your opinion of picking up, dusting your pant legs off, and moving forward?
Yeah, I think that, man, there's I'm trying to use like there's like tactical, and then there's like some big psychological things there, and we talked about some of them. One exercise, and you probably heard this, but is like literally the failure exercise. Like I had a friend out who had he's got a successful multiple restaurant locations around Nashville, and he was talking about going to a different market for the first time, and he's like, I don't know, I'm nervous, and what we're gonna do here. And so I had him go through this exercise of like, okay, you start this in this new city and it fails, like let's go there, and then what? Like, you still got a roof over your head, you're still fine, like you're still alive, right? So like sometimes it's like facing the fear and going through a failure of like, is this actually gonna look like, lessens its impact. Like the word failure or a bankruptcy, which, I would never like wish those, and I'll go more tactically on like how I think you can avoid things like that. But like, I would never wish that on anyone. I would never wish, like I said, I spent, nearly 2 years of my life in combat and never had a panic attack. And I had 2 as an entrepreneur my first couple of years, right? Like open sores on my back, like appendicitis, like I put myself in the hospital with this. Wow. It's serious stuff. Yeah. So the as you go into this, sometimes if we don't sort of like face the reality of failure, and we're just like, for me at least, it was like, that's not even a possibility. Like I'm not going to fail. It's not even something I'm going to face. And then it sort of like grows and it becomes literally like you're having a physiological response, like someone has a gun to your head. You know, like I have this thing with, one of my business now is I have multiple Brazilian jiu-jitsu gyms and do martial arts. And like one of the things is the martial arts is like, if you've never been in that situation where you're having like physical contact and you're fighting, then like the threat of that happening, your body literally
just locks up.
It's like, you might as well just like be in the trenches of World War I and really like, no, the dude's just good pushing you, you know, like you're fine, you know, or even get punched in the face, whatever. Like those are extreme examples, but it's you. And until you like psychologically face the possibility of failure, you can put yourself there, go through it. And sometimes just like letting that, the fear like work its way out and be like, okay, so what happens if it does? And have a plan. Like if it, all right, I'm going to, you know, like I sold my nice F-150 Platinum for the military. I sold my bad A condo from downtown Nashville. I moved to a tiny house in the ghetto. Like I did those things up front because I'm like, I'm going to keep my run. I'm going to keep my like expenses down. Right. Like, and I'll still have a house. I'll still have a car. And so you going through and having a bit of that contingency can help like alleviate that fear, because to your point, like sometimes it can become so overwhelming that it stops you from acting or has you acting irrationally or something. Now, tactically, when it comes down to that, what I have found, and it sounds like in, you know, your organization, you guys are doing this very well, is like, man, like start small. Like the concept of minimum viable product is something that gets thrown around so much. And yet in our heads, it's like, it's field of dreams. If I build it, they will come, and I'm going to get $1 million investor money or take a loan, and I'm going to build the most perfect thing in the best spot, and it's all just going to be great. It's like, that's never happening. Like that's just never happening. Like go get the tiny garage in the corner and like do one thing and get 20 people's opinions, then change it. And just like the step by step, like the patience. And I think you've probably seen this too, like the successful entrepreneurs that I know now that are, you know, maybe had their failures already and they're moving on. You see this over and over again. It's chunk by chunk. It's test, iterate, start small. But it's, man, that is, especially if you're younger, or if you're new to entrepreneurship and you're passionate, excited, like it's so hard to have that patience to go slow. But the ones that do, you know, don't crash and burn like you and I did.
Yep. Did you, like, you know, when that happened, 2:00 in the morning, did you ever regret leaving the military? Did you, or was it like, no, this is the path I'm supposed to be on?
Man, I kind of had like a burn the boats mentality. I definitely had the, I would have done things differently, you know? You know, the two sort of like major examples where, I won't say the name of the company, but it was a gym franchise company. And, in my head, it was like, a franchise, like it's a proven business model with a brand, and all you got to do is run the play and run a team. I'm like, done. It turns out that not all franchises work like that. And if you've got a franchise brand in a place that has never had the brand before, no one knows about it. And so you might as well have your own. It's kind of the way I think about it. And then there's some other things that go along with that. Like, you know, this was a gym. So like, if I was doing that now, I would have gone and got the smallest space with used weights and spent like 10 grand. And instead, because under these conditions in this model, you have to go buy all of their stuff. So you're spending $350,000 on equipment before you open your doors. And there was also, when we first started, it was going to be a 3,000 to 5,000 square foot gym. They changed the brand standards by the time I signed to when I got my lease deal. So I had to apply to the new brand standards. All of a sudden, what I thought was going to be a $500,000 or $600,000 investment was going to be a $1.2 million. So, or I lose my money. And looking back, it's like it's that sunk cost fallacy that we all hear about, but it's also very hard. And so I try to give myself grace looking back, like the person I was then and what I knew. Like the answer in the military was always just go harder, and it always worked. Like because the mission always, you mentioned infrastructure earlier, like around the military and structure, like the mission always ends. You always redeploy, like no matter how bad it gets, like you're always coming home and something's always ending. You're always going to have this refit period. But what I didn't appreciate was how that allowed me to turn into, you know, just a savage of a worker. Like, you know, I could run my body into the ground because eventually someone was pulling me out.
Yeah.
But as an entrepreneur, like no one's coming to pull you out. And
Yeah.
so the ability to learn how to self-regulate and recover and find a sustainable rate. And it's okay. Sometimes you have to burn the midnight oil if you're going to go hard for a bit. But like, are you planning refit and recovery if you're at an unsustainable rate? Like that. And I think in our own culture, this idea of burning the midnight oil and the entrepreneur working 20-hour days and never sleeping and living off energy, like is sort of, it's what's what I'm looking for? It's like sensationalized, or, you know, it's like,
glorified.
You look up to it. You glorify. That's what I was thinking.
Yeah.
It's like glorified. Like, yeah, that's what it's going to be. It's going to be great. It's like that. And that's why so many entrepreneurs are killing themselves. And that's
Well, it goes
why so
back
many
to
are
your question
burning out.
about identity, right? Like if that becomes everything and only what you do, and you fail, who are you, right?
Yeah.
And so I think those things are totally tied, and I've been guilty of that. And through my wife, I think I found a better balance. But yeah, like it's super hard.
Yeah, it really is. It can becomes very real. So those are like, you know, there's a reason, you know, you look at, again, we sort of glorify, we see like entrepreneurs as like the 19-year-old kid that drops out of Harvard, and you may know the exact data on this, but like the average age of the successful first-time entrepreneur is like 45.
Exactly. It is not 19.
It's not 19. So like, you know, keep that in mind too. And that's not to discourage a young person with like a dream, but also like, man, you know, when I look back, if I had to give myself getting in the military, I would say cling onto your, like the dream of you know, being working with leaders, doing executive coach and being a business owner are perfect. And I thought about this and I didn't do it because I didn't have patience, and I didn't have these other sort of mindset and skills, but it was, for me, it would have been like, go to a great company or become a consultant. I could have probably gotten a job with, you know, Deloitte or McKinsey or something, or got a job with a great company with a great culture. And like, man, just go get like, again, come from the military with zero business experience, like go work somewhere for 3 years, like just done 3 years. You know, I remember my mom with a gym, you know, like it's another example of like, just listen to your parents sometimes. But like, you know, my mom's like, hey, before you like put all that you own into starting a gym and a gym, like, should you go work in one for a year? I'm like, no, that's not, no, I don't need that. Like, you know, and if I would have gone and worked at a gym for like 3 months, I'd have been like, oh, I don't think I want to do this. Like if I would have worked the front desk or like been a personal trainer at a gym, I would have been like, oh, maybe I want to do something different, you know? So there's a little bit of like patience and feeling out, but of course, then there's the other side of like the fear of failure or risk taking holding you back from chasing your dreams. And everybody's in a different place, but man, isn't that the fun part of this whole deal?
Yeah, I mean, there's a good message in there about you know, some patience, some diligence, and learning something about what you want to go do. And I think that's hard. I mean, that's why we like founders that actually have a domain expertise, right? They've already lived it, right? They know the warts, they know the good, they know the bad, and usually they see something that's not working that they want to change. And they have a strong opinion, but they understand the infrastructure around that. And so I think that can be really good from perspective. You know, before we got on, you were talking about some of the work you're doing with Bunker Labs. As you kind of look at like programs like that and your own experiences, are there better bridges to like taking the expertise from the military and everything that you've learned for entrepreneurs, right? Like, I mean, that's part of what you're trying to go do from a consulting standpoint a little bit, but I'm just like, do programs like Bunker Labs and stuff really translate the strengths of the military to some of the opportunities in entrepreneurship?
I think they do a good job of it. I do think that, and I'm just going to be honest, I think that the road straight from military, for most people, straight from military to first-time entrepreneur, like to business owner, is just hard. Like I'm not seeing it. There's plenty of people that do it.
Like harder than like somebody who's not in the military?
Yeah. Well, put it this way. Harder than someone who, to your point, like has worked in the industry before.
Okay.
Right. Or worked in a business before. Because, you know, unless you're going to go be an entrepreneur doing military stuff, which I guess if you're going to go as a security contractor or something, like, yeah, that makes sense. But if you're like, but if you're in the military, there's so much, to your point, like there's a reason military veterans do have a higher success rate of successful entrepreneurship than non-military veterans. Like there is something there. And if I was giving advice to any of them, it would be, to your point, imagine if you took that and then you got some domain expertise in the industry and combine those two things, now I think you're really setting yourself up for success. I know plenty. I work in I'm part of this larger firm called Novus Global of coaches, and I'm in the construction division. I do work with like big construction companies and things like that. And a lot of my military veteran friends that have been successful as an entrepreneur in that space didn't come right out and be like, I was an infantry officer and now I'm going to be a general contractor and hire 20 people, right? They went and they were a project manager somewhere, or they got some sort of like just a few years, learned a little about the industry, and then they launched. And that success rate of that transition is much higher than I think a clean, I'm out of the military, now I'm an entrepreneur. Because there's also so much about like not just business and like being on your own. There's so much to transitioning out of the military on its own that's hard. And then you add on also doing like one of the other hardest things in the world to do, which is start a business from scratch. And you try to do it without industry experience. And you're just like, you start stacking like difficult, hard transition things all at once. And your success rate in my estimation, like just goes down.
Yeah. It's hard. Yeah. As you think about like your gyms and Legion and stuff, like, do you have kind of a 3-year vision of like where those things are going? Or do you plan much more like, let's just think about the next 12 months and kind of what we're doing, franchise opportunities, expansion? Talk to me how about you think about strategic planning in some of the work that you're doing?
Yeah, I do a lot. I would say it's interesting for me in that what we're at now, we had 3 locations. We sold 1. We have 2. Of Legion Jiu-Jitsu, which is my company in Nashville. And, that was really I mentioned earlier, so like my proving ground of like, I wanted to start a company, have it make money without me there. And it does. And it's sort of like a passion project. And I get hey, this is entrepreneurs are going to hear this and they're like, this is it. Like, I love going there. I teach jiu-jitsu. Somebody else runs it. I get a check every month. And I also get told almost every week or every other week of how much it's impacting other people's lives. I mean, it's like, perfect. What else do you want? Perfect, yeah, right? So my growth at this point is really around, my vision for coaching and the impact I want to have. And I would say, as I grow that business and grow my podcast and grow my branding and that sort of thing, I definitely have the larger vision of the impact I want to have and the brand and who I want to work with and that sort of thing. And then that vision is then broken down into, okay, what does that mean for like this year? What does that mean for, and then I break that down, those 4 outcomes for the year down into 6-week sprints. And I chase those, pretty ruthlessly with my coaches. And so I definitely have my grand sort of vision is to really change the conversation around what leaders are and how people consider themselves leaders. And so we haven't like released this yet, but I'm working on this 1 million leader movement thing. So hopefully maybe this will be out probably by the end of the year, where we want to have and give tools to, I want to get 1 million people in my lifetime. I'll get 1 million people to sign up to be, that they're committing to become the leader that they're capable of themselves, their families, their communities, and their businesses. And leaders grow, leaders give, leaders lead with character, and they, great leaders inspire and empower others to become even greater versions of themselves than they thought capable. And man, wouldn't the world look differently if we were all thinking that way?
Yeah, I totally agree. What's the format of that? I'm curious. I mean, I totally agree with you. And I think some of the best success stories in my life are just seeing people grow and take on, bigger and bigger leadership. It wasn't a revenue number. It wasn't an acquisition. It wasn't any of those things. It was seeing growth in people, because if you can help them reach their potential, that's pretty special.
It is. And I will say on the business side of this, I'm a firm believer of this, like, isn't just altruistic, that like where we're headed with, and that's your question about format, like format wise, you'll sign up, there'll be some resources, and then you can have a community and that sort of thing. But I think what's the bigger thing here is that, like, when you get those driven people that want to come work in your startup or want to come in your company or want to be a part of what you're doing, like driven high agency people, like people you want to pour into, like they value growth even over compensation. Like we know that, like if someone is like that, like they will take less money if they are growing and getting better versus if they're just stagnant in a job. Like, and so, it becomes a what we call a force multiplier in the military. It becomes a competitive advantage. I think leadership becomes a competitive advantage. And I think that, what's happening more and more is that this is like this is my new keynote I'm working on right now. So it'll come out soon, but it's like that, robots are the best managers. Like, no, if your job security, and I mean this with all sincerity, like I'm trying to help. If you're in a company and your job is to like management, where you're taking bigger tasks, turning around, and then delegating tasks out to other people, and then tracking where they do tasks, like you will not have a job in 3 years. Like it's not like robots can manage tasks. Management is about optimizing the efficiency of systems, and like robots do that better than humans. So like that's gone. Now, that being said, what does that leave you with? That leaves you with smaller companies that are empowered with technology, with high agency people. And you have smaller companies that can do, companies of 50 that can do it. It used to take a company of 1,000 to do. And so my question would be, you talk about this growth piece, right? Like, are you becoming the type of person that those 50 people want to follow?
Yeah, I agree. I think, and I love the message in the mission. I think the part that I'm struggling with is the next generation comes up, like what's the best way to engage and help them get there, right? Like you can do it in like one-on-one in your company and you could go do it. Yeah. But it's like, I guess I look at a lot of the folks that we have from founders today, they have a lot of agency, they want to change the world, they have a lot of those characteristics, they definitely have a lot of potential. But like, slowing them down to like read something or watch a video or something like that, like that's not the best way for them to learn. And so I don't know exactly what that format looks like. I mean, you can tell the lessons. We're starting to figure out like so we have an app that basically is their journey through our program. And what we're trying to do is say, how do we like insert stuff in their process in a critical time where they need this information to grow? Right, where it's now in the workflow of the problem that they're dealing with. I'm dealing with a conflict with my business partner, or I'm trying to figure out how to do I discount to get this client on? Like we're trying to find opportunities through this journey to basically insert growth and leadership opportunities, and it's not always easy, right? But like that's what seems to work better because it's situational. Like I need this problem now, and the growth of leadership is a continuum that should happen through the rest of your life. And so you find people that are intellectually curious, they want to learn, they want to grow, but like figuring out the right dynamics and tools, I guess personally, I've found that to be a little bit more of a challenge.
Yeah, I totally get that. I think getting them to slow down and also like maybe reframing around, up front around, I feel like this is a great moment to like come back to the beginning of like identity and purpose of them. And, if I think getting priorities right, I think we get ahead of our skis when we get our priorities out of whack. So like, my personal priorities, right? And this is where I think mentorship comes in of people like that, of people like us, maybe who have gone through this a bit, can come in and, some listen, some don't, some have to fall on their face. But my priorities very clearly are me, like my mental health, my physical health, taking care of me, my relationship with my wife, my relationship with my son, taking care of my clients, biz dev. Like that's the order. And if those things get out of whack, everything's out of whack. And so I think there's a lot of lessons, and then we can help them be like, okay, yeah, you have a plan for your business. What's your plan for you? And so if you have the founder who is like, yeah, I'm getting up and it's just, they get that flipped, and all of a sudden it's just like everything is about the business, and they're not taking care of themselves. It's like, no. Part of this process is like how you become better. So like, what is your workout routine? What's your sleep hygiene? How are you optimizing that? How are your relationships? Because you and I both know, like I've been divorced before too in the military. Like if that relationship starts going to crap, like you're not showing up to work your best self. Like, and that has to come first. So like, I think there's a lot of opportunity here for us to have conversations with, and I say young entrepreneurs, meaning just new to entrepreneurship, but they could obviously, whatever age they are, of like, hey, part of this is like the agency now of like kind of we talked about before, of like you mastering yourself. Like this is part of the process. It's not just about customer acquisition. It's not just about like, what are your margins and what is your, runway and all that stuff's important. And if you like, what is your plan to invest in yourself right now? And like, let's talk about that first. And if you aren't doing that, like, you're going to burn out anyway, or you're going to create a future that you don't want to live in.
Yeah, I think it's a really good point. This has been good, Sean. I think we're kind of getting up here in time. If people wanted to work with you or learn more about kind of what you're doing, what's the best way to do that?
Yeah, absolutely. My website is seanpatton.me. I'm sure I'll put that in show notes. Also, Sean Patton at novus.global. Like I said, the beautiful thing about being a solo coach for like 6 years and then joining this firm is now I'm a team of 100 of world-class executive coaches that work with everything from startups to senior executives and to Fortune 5 to professional athletes. And so we can really put together a team that can handle any situation, and we get to get and play with all kinds of people. So I would love to have a chat.
Well, thanks, Sean. I really appreciate you being vulnerable, sharing your expertise. And I think there's a lot of great nuggets here for people to leverage, and hopefully they reach out and talk to you.
Thanks so much, Todd. Appreciate it, bro.
Okay. Thanks for listening to Startup Stories from the Treehouse. If you enjoyed this episode, please take a moment to like, follow, or subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. And if you found our conversation helpful, leave a review. It really helps other founders discover our show. For more insight and episode summaries, don't forget to subscribe to the Wildfire Lab Substack. We appreciate your support and can't wait to share more stories with you next time.